A widow. A forgotten motel in the desert. A locked door marked Room 12. And behind it, a secret worth $25 million. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the funeral. Claire Morgan sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and sympathy cards she couldn't read. The envelope was thick, formal, with a return address she didn't recognize: Caldwell and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Reno, Nevada. She almost threw it away. Another creditor, she thought. Another reminder that David's death had left her with nothing but debt and questions. But something made her open it. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, precise, cold. Dear Mrs. Morgan, we regret to inform you of the passing of your husband, David Morgan. As executor of his estate, we are writing to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of property located at 1847 Route 95, Callaway, Nevada, the Desert Rose Motel, deed and keys enclosed. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Claire stared at the words until they blurred. A motel. In Nevada. David had never mentioned Nevada. In 12 years of marriage, he'd never talked about owning property, investing in real estate, or anything beyond their small life in Sacramento. He'd been a teacher, quiet, steady, careful with money. They'd talked about everything. Or so she thought. She unfolded the second page, a deed signed and notarized, dated 6 months before his death. Her hands trembled. 6 months. He'd bought a motel and never told her. Why? The drive took 8 hours. Claire left before dawn, the city lights fading behind her as the highway stretched into emptiness. The landscape changed, slowly green, giving way to brown, then to nothing but dust and sky. By the time she crossed into Nevada, the world had been reduced to heat, silence, and the endless hum of tires on asphalt. She pulled over once at a gas station that looked abandoned until an old man shuffled out from the back. Headed to Callaway? He asked, squinting at her through the haze. How did you know? He shrugged. Ain't nothing else out that way. What's it like? Used to be a town, now it's just a place people pass through, or hide. She didn't ask what he meant. Callaway appeared like a mirage. One moment, the road was empty. The next, a cluster of low buildings shimmered in the distance, wavering in the heat. A gas station. A diner with boarded windows. A post office that looked like it hadn't seen mail in decades. And at the far edge of town, rising from the desert like something left behind by time, the Desert Rose Motel. Claire pulled into the gravel parking lot and turned off the engine. The silence was immediate, heavy, like the air itself had stopped moving. The motel was a relic from the 1950 seconds. 2 stories of faded pink stucco, iron railings rusted orange, and a neon sign that read vacancy in letters half dead from the Sunday. 40 rooms, she counted, maybe more. All of them dark. She stepped out of the car, and the heat hit her like a wall. The air smelled of dust and creosote, and something else, something old and forgotten. She walked slowly toward the office, her shoes crunching on gravel. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was cooler but stale, thick with the scent of old carpet and cigarette smoke. A wooden counter stretched across the room, covered in a layer of dust so thick it looked like snow. Behind it, a wall of keys hung on numbered hooks. All of them were there. Except one. Room 12. You're Claire. She spun around. An old man stood in the doorway, backlit by the Sunday. His face was weathered, lined deep as tree bark, his eyes sharp beneath a wide-brimmed hat. I'm Earl, he said. Caretaker. Been watching the place since David passed. Her throat tightened at the sound of her husband's name. You knew him? Not well. He came out here once, maybe twice a year, paid me to keep the lights on, make sure the place didn't fall apart. Why did he buy it? Earl's expression didn't change. Didn't ask, wasn't my business. He stepped inside and set a ring of keys on the counter. Everything's yours now, utilities are paid up through the month. After that, it's on you. Claire picked up the keys, feeling their weight. What about room 12? Earl went still. What about it? The key's missing. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. That one stays locked. Why? Because your husband said so. But he's gone. Doesn't matter. Earl turned toward the door. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Wait. But he was already walking away, his boots crunching across the gravel, disappearing into the blinding light. Claire stood alone in the empty office, the keys cold in her palm. She looked at the wall of hooks. Room 12's hook was empty. But the door itself, she could see it from where she stood, at the far end of the second-floor walkway. Faded pink paint, rusted number, chain wrapped around the handle. And beneath the chain, a sliver of darkness. The door wasn't fully closed. It was open. Just slightly. As if something inside was waiting. Claire stood in the office for a long time after Earl left. The silence pressed against her ears like water. She looked at the wall of keys again, then at the door to room 12 inches the distance. The chain wrapped around its handle gleamed faintly in the afternoon light. And the door still open, just a crack seemed to watch her back. She forced herself to move. The motel was larger than it looked from the road. 40 rooms spread across 2 floors, connected by an outdoor walkway with iron railings that left rust stains on her hands. Claire started on the first floor, unlocking doors one by one. Most rooms were empty, bare mattresses, water-stained walls, curtains bleached white by the Sunday. But some rooms still had belongings inside. A suitcase in room 4, covered in dust. A pair of shoes by the bed in room 7. A jacket hanging in the closet of room 9, the fabric stiff and faded. It felt like people had left in a hurry. Or never left at all. By the time she reached the second floor, the sun had dropped lower, casting long shadows across the walkway. The air was still hot, thick, hard to breathe. Claire paused at the top of the stairs, wiping sweat from her forehead. Room 12 was at the far end of the walkway, past 11 other doors. From where she stood, she could see the chain more clearly now. Heavy, industrial, wrapped tight around both handles. But the gap in the door had widened. She was sure of it. When she'd first arrived, it had been barely visible, a sliver of darkness. Now it was an inch, maybe more. Enough to see inside. Except there was nothing to see. Just black. Claire walked toward it slowly, her footsteps echoing on the metal walkway. The closer she got, the colder the air felt. She stopped a few feet away, staring at the gap. Hello? Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the emptiness. No answer. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the chain. It was warm. Too warm. Like someone had been holding it. She pulled her hand back and stepped away, her pulse hammering. Then she turned and walked quickly back to the office. That night, Claire slept in room 1. It was the only room with a working air conditioner, and the only one that didn't feel like someone was still living there. She lay on top of the sheets, too tired to unpack, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the AC was the only sound. Until it wasn't. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving along the walkway above her. Claire sat up, her breath catching. The footsteps stopped. Then started again. Closer this time. She grabbed her phone, but there was no signal. The footsteps continued, steady and rhythmic, until they reached the end of the walkway. Then silence. Claire waited, her heart pounding. Nothing. She lay back down, trying to convince herself it was the building settling. The wind, her imagination. But then she saw it. A thin line of light, flickering beneath her door. Not from the walkway outside. From inside the motel. From the direction of room 12. Morning came too slowly. Claire barely slept. Every creak, every shift of the building made her flinch. When the sun finally rose, she walked outside and stood in the parking lot, breathing in the dry desert air. Earl's truck was parked by the office. She found him inside, brewing coffee on a hot plate. "You hear anything last night?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Like what?" Footsteps on the second floor. Could have been anything. Wind, animals, place is old. And the light? Now he looked at her. What light? Under my door, coming from upstairs. Earl set down his mug. Room 12? I don't know. Maybe. He shook his head slowly. Then you already know the answer. What does that mean? Means your husband didn't lock that door for no reason? Claire crossed her arms. Earl, I need to know what's in there. No, you don't. He was my husband. Was, Earl said quietly. Past tense. Whatever's in that room, it belonged to the man he used to be, not the one you married. The words hit harder than she expected. Then who was he? Earl picked up his mug and walked toward the door. Someone who knew how to keep secrets. After he left, Claire searched the office. She went through every drawer, every cabinet, every file box stacked in the back room. Most of it was junk, old receipts, maintenance logs, tax documents from the 1980 seconds. But in the bottom drawer of the desk, she found something. A guest book. Leather-bound, edges worn smooth. She opened it carefully. The entries went back decades. Names, dates, room numbers. Most were ordinary families passing through, salesmen, retirees. But as she flipped through the pages, she noticed a pattern. Every few months, someone checked into room 12. Different names every time, but always the same notation in the margin, paid in full, no record. And at the bottom of the last entry, dated 3 months before David's death, someone had written in pencil, "If you're reading this, don't open the door." Claire's hands shook. She slammed the book shut and stood, her pulse racing. That's when she saw it. A photograph slipped between the pages, falling to the floor. She picked it up. It was torn in half. One side showed David younger, maybe in his 20s, smiling at the camera. The other side was missing. But she could see the edge of someone's shoulder, a hand resting on David's arm. Someone he'd been close to. Someone he'd never mentioned. Claire turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded ink, Room 12, 1998, The Only Way Out. That night, Claire stood outside room 12. She'd tried every key on the ring Earl had given her. None of them fit. The chain was too thick to cut with anything she had. But the gap in the door was wider now. Wide enough to see inside. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a bed, neatly made, a table, a chair, and on the wall, something that made her breath stop. Photographs, dozens of them, pinned in rows. Faces she didn't recognize, and in the center, larger than the rest, David's face. But not alone. Standing beside him was a woman Claire had never seen before. Dark hair, sharp eyes, smiling, her arm around his waist. Before Claire could process it, something slid under her door downstairs. She heard it, the soft scrape of paper on tile. She ran down the stairs, her hands shaking. On the floor of room 1 lay another torn photograph. The other half. David's face. And the woman beside him, smiling, alive. On the back, in the same faded ink, "She's still waiting." Claire didn't sleep after finding the photograph. She sat on the edge of the bed in room 1, staring at the two halves laid side by side. David's face, the woman's face. She's still waiting. Waiting for what? Or worse, waiting where? Morning came slowly, the desert sun turning the sky from black to bruised purple to pale gold. Claire stood outside, breathing in the dry air, trying to clear her head. She needed answers, and the only place to find them was inside the motel itself. She spent the day going through every room again, this time searching for anything David might have left behind. In room 3, she found a stack of old newspapers, yellowed and brittle, all dated from the late 1990s. Headlines about missing persons, unsolved disappearances, witnesses who vanished before trials. In room 8, a box of Polaroids, faces she didn't recognize, people standing in front of the motel, smiling, relieved. Some had dates written on the back, others just initials. And in room 15, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, she found a notebook. Handwritten, careful, detailed. Pages and pages of names, dates, destinations, all in David's handwriting. Claire sat on the dusty floor and read. Each entry was the same: a name, a date of arrival, a room number, always, room 12, and a final destination marked only by coordinates. No explanations, no context. Just records of people passing through. People who needed to disappear. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. David hadn't just owned this motel. He'd been running something. A network. A system. A way to make people vanish. That afternoon, Claire drove into town. The diner was the only place still open, a low building with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed in the heat. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of coffee and grease. A waitress stood behind the counter, maybe 60, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Dot. "You're the one who bought the motel," Dot said, not a question. "Inherited it." "Same thing." Dot poured coffee without asking. "You staying?" "I don't know yet." Dot studied her for a moment, then leaned against the counter. "Your husband never came into town much, kept to himself, but people knew what he was doing out there." Claire's pulse quickened. What was he doing? Helping people no one else would help. What kind of people? Dot wiped down the counter slowly, choosing her words. The kind who couldn't go to the cops. The kind who needed to disappear before someone made them disappear permanent. Claire's throat tightened. Like witness protection? Something like that, but off the books. No government, no paper trail. Just your husband and that motel. How long was he doing this? Long as I've been here. 20 years, maybe more. Claire stared at her coffee, her mind spinning. Did you ever see anyone staying in room 12? Dot's expression shifted. That room's different. Different? How? People who went into room 12 didn't just disappear for a while. They disappeared forever. The words hung in the air. Claire set down her cup. There was a woman, dark hair, in her 30s maybe. She was with David in a photograph. Dot's face went pale. You saw her picture? Yes. Who is she? Dot looked toward the window, then back at Claire. Her name was Elena. She came through here about 15 years ago, scared out of her mind, said someone was hunting her. Your husband put her in room 12. And she never came out. Claire's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, she went into that room, and nobody ever saw her again. Not David, not Earl, nobody. Did anyone look for her? Your husband said she'd moved on, that she was safe. But people talk. Some say she's still in there. That's impossible. Dot shrugged. Maybe, but Earl won't go near that door, and neither will anyone else who knows the story. Claire drove back to the motel in silence, Dot's words replaying in her mind. She never came out. People say she's still in there. It was insane. But so was everything else. When she pulled into the parking lot, the sun was already sinking, casting long shadows across the pink stucco walls. The motel looked different in the fading light. Less abandoned. More watchful. Claire climbed the stairs to the second floor, her footsteps echoing on the metal walkway. Room 12's door was still chained. Still open, just a crack. But now, standing closer, she could hear something. A sound. Faint, rhythmic. Breathing. Claire's heart hammered. She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the gap. The sound stopped. Then, from inside the room, a voice. Soft. Female. Broken. He promised he'd come back for it. Claire stumbled backward, her breath catching. The voice came again, quieter now. He promised. Claire's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. No signal. She looked at the door, then at the chain. The gap had widened again. Now it was large enough to see more of the room inside. The bed, the table, the photographs on the wall. And in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, a figure, sitting. Still, watching. Claire ran. She didn't stop until she reached room 1, slamming the door behind her and locking it. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She sat on the bed, trying to breathe, trying to think. Someone was in room 12. Or something. She didn't know which was worse. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A text. From an unknown number. "Stop looking, or you'll end up like her." Claire stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Then another text. "Room 12 isn't a room. It's a grave." Claire didn't leave room 1 that night. She sat with her back against the door, phone in hand, staring at the threatening texts. "Stop looking. Room 12 isn't a room. It's a grave." Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she'd been asking questions. And someone wanted her to stop. But she couldn't. Not now. Not after hearing that voice. He promised he'd come back for it. At dawn, Claire forced herself to move. She walked to the office, her legs shaking, and began searching again. This time, she wasn't looking for guest logs or photographs. She was looking for David's secrets. The office was small, cluttered with decades of paperwork. But in the back, behind a filing cabinet, she found a panel in the wall. Loose, hidden, she pried it open with a screwdriver. Behind it was a metal lockbox. No key. She carried it outside and smashed the lock with a rock. Inside were files. Dozens of them. Each one labeled with a name, a date, and a destination. Witness protection placements. Falsified identities. Encrypted coordinates. David hadn't just been helping people disappear. He'd been creating new lives for them. But one file was different. Thicker. Worn at the edges. Marked in red ink, Room 12, Final. Claire's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, folded around a small brass key. The note was in David's handwriting. "Claire, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm sorry for everything I kept from you. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong. The truth is in the safety deposit box. Bank of Nevada, Reno, Box 447. Forgive me. The key will explain everything." Claire stared at the note, tears burning her eyes. Then she looked at the key. Small, brass, stamped with a number. 447. The drive to Reno took 3 hours. Claire didn't stop. Didn't eat. Didn't think about anything except the key in her pocket and the questions burning through her mind. The Bank of Nevada was a squat building on the edge of downtown, its windows tinted dark against the desert Sunday. Inside, the air was cold, sterile. A clerk led her to a private room and brought the box. Claire sat alone, staring at it. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The lock clicked. She lifted the lid. Inside was a leather journal, a stack of documents, and a folded map. Claire opened the journal first. The first page was dated 15 years ago. David's handwriting filled every line. "I witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. A theft. $25 million in bearer bonds, stolen from a federal evidence locker by people who were supposed to be protecting it. Agents. Officials. People with badges and power. They saw me. I ran. I've been running ever since." Claire's breath caught. She turned the page. "I couldn't go to the authorities. They were the authorities. So I did the only thing I could. I hid the evidence. And I disappeared. The motel became my cover. A place to help others like me. People who'd seen too much. People who needed to vanish. But I kept the proof. In case I ever got the chance to use it. It's in room 12. Claire's pulse hammered. She flipped through the rest of the journal. Names. Dates. Detailed accounts of corruption, bribery, conspiracy. A list of officials still in power. People who would kill to keep this buried. And at the back of the journal, a map. Hand-drawn. Precise. Showing the layout of the motel. With an X marked inside, room 12. Beneath it, David had written, "The bonds are there, hidden, safe. If something happens to me, use them to finish what I started." Claire closed the journal. her hands trembling. David hadn't been running a protection network out of kindness. He'd been hiding from the people he'd exposed. And now, they were after her. She drove back to the motel in silence, the journal heavy in her lap. The sun was setting by the time she arrived, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. The motel looked different now. Not abandoned. Waiting. Claire climbed the stairs to the second floor, her heart pounding. Room 12's door was still chained. Still cracked open. But as she approached, she froze. The chain was on the ground. Cut. The door stood wide open. Claire's breath caught. She stepped forward slowly, her pulse thundering in her ears. Inside, the room was pristine. The bed was made. The floor was clean. The photographs on the wall were gone. And on the bed, in the center, sat a briefcase. Black. Leather. Unmarked. Claire stepped inside, her legs shaking. The air was cold. Too cold. She reached for the briefcase. Her fingers brushed the leather. Then she heard it. A voice. Behind her. "You shouldn't have come back." Claire spun around. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, mid-50s, gray suit, cold eyes. He held a gun. "Mrs. Morgan," he said calmly, "we need to talk about what your husband stole." Claire didn't move. The man in the doorway stepped closer, the gun steady in his hand. "Put your hands where I can see them." She raised them slowly, her breath shallow. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been looking for that briefcase for a very long time." He gestured toward the bed. "Open it." Claire's hands shook as she reached for the briefcase. The latches clicked. She lifted the lid. Inside, stacked in neat bundles, were bearer bonds. Dozens of them. Each one marked with a serial number, a face value, a government seal. She didn't need to count them to know what they were worth. $25 million. Maybe more. Beneath the bonds lay a folder. Thick. Official. Stamped with federal seals. Claire pulled it out carefully. Inside were documents, bank records, wire transfers, names and dates spanning 2 decades. A money laundering scheme. Politicians. Federal agents. Organized crime. All connected. All guilty. And at the bottom of the folder, a list of names. People still in power. People who would do anything to keep this buried. The man stepped closer, his eyes on the bonds. "Your husband was smarter than we thought. He hid it well." "Who are you?" Claire asked again, her voice stronger now. "Someone who works for the people on that list." "You killed him." The man's expression didn't change. "Your husband killed himself the moment he decided to steal from us." Claire's hands clenched. "He didn't steal. He witnessed a crime and tried to expose it." "Same thing." The man reached for the briefcase. "Now step back." Claire didn't move. "If you take this, nothing changes. They stay in power. David died for nothing. David died because he was stupid. Don't make the same mistake." He grabbed the briefcase. That's when Claire heard it. A voice. From the hallway. "Put the gun down." Earl stood in the doorway, a shotgun leveled at the man's chest. The man froze. "Earl," he said calmly, "this doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't. I've been watching this place for 20 years. Knew someone would come eventually. Then you know what's in that case, and you know what happens to people who get in the way. I'm old. Don't care much about what happens to me anymore." Earl's finger moved to the trigger. "But I cared about David, and I'm not letting you take what he died protecting." The man's jaw tightened. Then he lowered the gun. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." Earl fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The man dropped the briefcase and ran. Claire sank to the floor, her legs giving out. Earl lowered the shotgun and walked over, picking up the briefcase. "You okay?" She nodded, though she wasn't. "How did you know?" "Saw the car circling, figured they'd finally made their move. They'll come back." "Probably." Earl handed her the briefcase. "That's why you need to finish this." Claire looked at the bonds, then at the documents. "How?" The way David wanted, use the evidence, expose them. I don't know how. You're smarter than you think. Earl turned toward the door. And you're braver than David ever was. That night, Claire sat in room 1, the briefcase open on the bed. She stared at the bonds, at the documents, at the names. If you've been following her story this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that prove every secret has a price. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know where you are. Give us the bonds, or you'll end up like David. Claire's hands shook. Then another text. You have 24 hours. She set the phone down and closed her eyes. David had spent 15 years running, hiding, protecting her from this. And now she had a choice. Run. Or fight. She thought about the journal, about the people David had helped, the lives he'd saved, the justice he'd died trying to deliver. She opened her eyes and looked at the briefcase. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. The next morning, a black car pulled into the motel parking lot. 2 men in suits stepped out. They walked toward the office, their expressions cold, professional. One of them knocked on the door of room 1. No answer. He knocked again. Mrs. Morgan, we know you're in there. Still nothing. He nodded to the other man, who kicked the door open. The room was empty. The briefcase was gone. On the bed lay a single note, handwritten. You're too late. The evidence is already gone, and the world is about to know what you did. The man's face went pale. He pulled out his phone and dialed. We have a problem. Claire sat in a diner 200 miles away, the briefcase beside her. Across from her sat a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed, professional. A federal prosecutor. You're sure about this? The woman asked. Claire nodded. David spent 15 years protecting this. I'm not letting it die with him. The prosecutor opened the briefcase and examined the bonds, the documents. Her expression shifted. This is extraordinary. If this is authentic, it could bring down a dozen officials, maybe more. It's authentic. The prosecutor looked at Claire. You understand what you're risking? These people won't stop. They'll come after you. They already have. And you're still willing to go forward? Claire thought about David. About room 12. About the voice that had whispered through the walls. He promised he'd come back for it. She looked at the prosecutor. Yes. The safe house was a motel room in a town Claire had never heard of. Cheap carpet, thin walls. A window that overlooked a parking lot full of cars that had seen better days. The prosecutor had arranged it. Stay here. Don't leave. Don't call anyone. We'll contact you when it's safe. That had been 3 days ago. Claire hadn't slept. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, replaying everything in her mind. David's journal, the bonds, the names, the man with the gun. Earl's shotgun blast. The threats. You'll end up like David. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. But all she could see was room 12. The open door. The pristine bed. The briefcase. And the voice? He promised he'd come back for it. On the 4th day, the prosecutor called. We're moving forward. The evidence is solid. Arrests will be made within the week. Claire's voice was flat. And then what? Then it's over. You'll be safe. Will I? A pause. We'll do everything we can to protect you. That's not an answer. The prosecutor sighed. Mrs. Morgan, I understand this is difficult, but you did the right thing. Claire hung up. She sat in the silence, the phone heavy in her hand. The right thing. David had done the right thing, and it had gotten him killed. Now she'd done the right thing. And she was sitting in a motel room, alone, terrified, waiting for someone to decide whether she lived or died. That night, Claire couldn't take it anymore. She left the motel and drove. No destination, no plan. Just driving. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides of the highway, dark and silent under a sky full of stars. She drove until she saw the sign. Callaway, 5 miles. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She shouldn't go back. The prosecutor had told her to stay away. But something pulled her forward. A need to see it one more time. The place where everything had started and ended. The Desert Rose Motel looked different in the moonlight. Less abandoned, more like a ghost. Claire parked in the empty lot and stepped out. The air was cold, the wind sharp. She walked slowly toward the office, her footsteps crunching on gravel. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was the same. Dust on the counter, keys on the wall. Room 12's hook still empty. She climbed the stairs to the second floor. The door to room 12 was closed now. No chain, no gap. Just a door. Claire stood in front of it, her heart pounding. She reached for the handle. It turned. The door opened. Inside, the room was dark. Claire stepped in slowly, her breath shallow. The bed was still made, the walls were still bare. But on the nightstand, something caught the moonlight. A photograph. Claire picked it up. It was the same one she'd found torn in half. But now it was whole. David and the woman Elena standing together, smiling. And on the back, in David's handwriting, "She was the first one I saved, the one who made me believe I could do this. If you're reading this, it means you found the truth. Finish what I started. For her. For all of them." Claire's hands trembled. She turned the photograph over again, looking at Elena's face. The woman who had disappeared into room 12 15 years ago. The woman whose voice Claire had heard. He promised he'd come back for it. But David hadn't come back. And Elena. Claire's breath caught. She looked around the room. Then she saw it. A loose floorboard, barely visible in the corner. She knelt and pried it up. Beneath it was a small space. And inside, a box. Wooden, old, locked. Claire's pulse quickened. She searched the room until she found a key taped beneath the nightstand. It fit. The box opened. Inside was a letter. Addressed to David. In Elena's handwriting, "David, if you're reading this, I made it out. I'm safe. Thank you for giving me a second chance at life. I'll never forget what you did. The bonds are my gift to you. Use them to help others the way you helped me. And if something happens, make sure the truth comes out. You're a good man. Don't ever forget that. Elena." Claire read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Elena hadn't died in room 12. She'd escaped. And she'd left David the bonds evidence she'd stolen from the people who'd tried to kill her. Evidence David had protected for 15 years. If you've been following her story this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us that even the smallest act of courage can change everything. Claire folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. Then she stood and looked around the room one last time. David hadn't failed. He'd saved Elena. And dozens of others. He'd kept the truth alive. Now it was her turn to finish it. Claire walked back to her car, the letter in her pocket. She pulled out her phone and called the prosecutor. "I need to testify. Mrs. Morgan. I need to tell the whole story, David's story, Elena's story, all of it." A pause. "That puts you at risk." "I know. Are you sure?" Claire looked back at the motel, at room 12's dark window. "Yes." The next morning, Claire sat in a federal courthouse, waiting. The prosecutor had arranged for her to give a deposition, to tell everything she knew, to put David's evidence and his sacrifice on the record. She was terrified, but she was ready. A door opened. A man stepped out. Older, gray hair, kind eyes. He introduced himself. "Mrs. Morgan, I'm Lucas Grant. I was David's handler when he was working with the Bureau." Claire's breath caught. "You knew him?" "For 15 years. He was one of the bravest people I've ever known." Lucas sat down beside her. "He talked about you, all the time, said you were the reason he kept going." Claire's throat tightened. "He never told me any of this. He was protecting you. The less you knew, the safer you were." "I'm not safe now." "No," Lucas said quietly. "But you're doing what he couldn't. You're finishing it." He handed her a burner phone. If you're going to do this, you do it right, and you do it now. Claire looked at the phone, then at Lucas. What do I do? You make the call, to the media, to the people. You tell David's story, and you make sure the world knows the truth. Claire's hands shook. And then? Lucas smiled faintly. Then, you live, the way David always wanted you to. Claire took the phone. And she made the call. The story broke 3 days later. Claire watched it unfold from a safe house 200 miles away, the television flickering in the dim light. Federal officials arrested in $25 million corruption scandal. Whistleblower evidence exposes decades-old money laundering scheme. Bearer bonds recovered from Nevada motel lead to multiple indictments. Her hands trembled as she watched agents in tactical gear leading men in suits out of government buildings. Names she recognized from David's journal. Faces she'd seen in the documents. All of them arrested. All of them exposed. The prosecutor called. It's done. The arrests are being processed. You're safe now. Claire didn't feel safe. She felt hollow. What about David? A pause. The investigation confirms what we suspected. His death wasn't an accident. It was arranged by the people we just arrested. Claire's breath caught. They killed him? Yes, he knew too much, and he refused to hand over the evidence. She closed her eyes, tears burning. He died protecting it. He died protecting you, the prosecutor said quietly. If you'd known what he had, they would have come for you too. Claire hung up. She sat in the silence, staring at the television. David hadn't left her out of selfishness. He'd left her to keep her alive. A week later, Lucas drove her back to the motel. The desert looked the same. Endless, silent, unforgiving. But the motel was different now. FBI tape still hung across some of the doors. Tire tracks scarred the gravel parking lot. Room 12's door was open. Claire walked toward it slowly, her heart pounding. Lucas stayed by the car, giving her space. Inside, the room was empty. The bed was stripped. The walls were bare. The FBI had taken everything, the photographs, the documents, the evidence. But as Claire stood in the center of the room, she felt something. Not fear. Not grief. Peace. This room wasn't a grave. It was a sanctuary. A place where David had saved lives. Where Elena had found safety. Where the truth had waited, patient and silent, for someone brave enough to find it. Claire walked to the window and looked out at the desert. Then she saw it. A loose board beneath the windowsill. She knelt and pried it up. Inside was an envelope. Her name written on the front in David's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Claire, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the lies, for all the secrets, for leaving you in the dark. I wanted to tell you. Every day, I wanted to. But I was afraid you'd be in danger, afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd leave. The truth is, I wasn't the man you thought I was. I was running, hiding, pretending to be someone I wasn't. But with you, I felt real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a man with a past. I was just David. Your David. I built this place to help people who were running, just like me, people who needed a second chance. And every time I saved someone, I thought maybe I could save myself too. But I couldn't. The past always catches up. If you found this letter, it means you've found the evidence. And if you're reading it, it means you're stronger than I ever was. I know you, Claire. I know you'll want to finish what I started. And I know you're scared. But you're not alone. You never were. The people I helped, they're out there, living new lives, free because someone gave them a chance. That's what Room 12 was, a chance. And that's what I'm giving you now. The choice is yours. Walk away, or finish it. But whatever you decide, know this. I loved you. From the moment I met you until the moment I died. You were my second chance. And you were always stronger than you knew. David. Claire folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. She pressed it to her chest and let herself cry. For the husband she'd lost. for the hero she'd never known, for the life they could have had if the world had been kinder, but also for the strength she'd found, for the truth she'd uncovered, for the justice she'd delivered. When the tears stopped, she stood and walked to the door. Lucas was waiting outside. "You okay?" Claire nodded. "I found a letter." "From David?" "Yes." Lucas looked at her, his expression gentle. "What did it say?" Claire smiled faintly. "That I was always stronger than I knew." That night, Claire stood on the motel's roof, looking out at the desert. The stars burned brightly overhead, and the wind was soft and cool. She thought about David's letter, about room 12, about Elena, and all the others who had passed through. And she realized something. David hadn't left her a burden. He'd left her a gift. A place where people could start over. A place where secrets became second chances. And now it was hers. She looked down at the motel, at the faded pink walls and the rusted sign. And she whispered into the night, "I'll finish it, David, I promise." Below, room 12's door stood open, waiting. Not for the past, for the future. 6 months later, the Desert Rose Motel looked different. The pink stucco had been repainted, soft and clean against the blue desert sky. The rusted neon sign was gone, replaced by a wooden one that read, "Safe Harbor." The parking lot was full. Not with abandoned cars, but with life. Children played on the gravel while their mothers sat in the shade, talking quietly. A woman hung laundry on a line stretched between 2 posts, the fabric snapping in the wind. And in the office, Claire Morgan stood behind the counter, answering the phone. "Yes, we have space. Come when you're ready. No questions asked." She hung up and looked out the window. The motel had become what David always intended. A place where people could disappear. Not from the law. From danger? Claire had used the reward money from the bearer bonds, $2 million, from the federal government for exposing the conspiracy to transform the motel into a shelter. A safe house for women escaping domestic violence. For families running from threats. For anyone who needed a second chance. She'd hired staff, renovated rooms, built a playground, and she'd kept room 12 exactly as it was, untouched. A memorial to David and everyone he'd saved. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Claire walked to room 12. The door was locked now, a brass plaque beside it that read, "In memory of David Morgan and all those who found refuge here." Claire unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was clean, preserved. The bed made, the walls bare. On the nightstand sat a photograph. David and Elena, smiling. And beside it, the letter David had written. Claire read it again, her fingers tracing the words. "You were always stronger than you knew." She folded the letter carefully and placed it back. Then she whispered, "I finished it, David." Her voice was steady. "The people you helped, they're safe. The people who hurt you, they're in prison. And the people who need help, now they're here." She looked around the room. Room 12 isn't a secret anymore, it's a promise. The wind outside picked up, rattling the window softly. Claire smiled. "We're safe now." She stepped outside and locked the door one last time. The desert stretched endlessly before her, glowing gold in the fading light. A car pulled into the parking lot. A woman stepped out, a child in her arms. She looked scared, exhausted. Claire walked toward her. "Welcome to Safe Harbor," she said gently. "You're safe here." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Claire led her inside, past the office, past the other rooms, to a place where she could rest. Where she could breathe. Where she could begin again. Later that night, Claire sat on the roof of the motel, the same place David must have sat countless times. The stars burned brightly overhead. The wind was cool and soft. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Broken, lost, drowning in grief. And she thought about the woman she was now. Stronger, purposeful, free. David hadn't left her a burden. He'd left her a gift. The gift of knowing that even in loss, there was a way to begin again. That even in the darkest places, light could still find a way in. She looked down at the motel, at the lights glowing in the windows, at the families inside, safe and warm. And she whispered into the night, "Thank you, David, for everything." The wind carried her words across the desert, into the vastness. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt at peace. The Desert Rose Motel, now safe harbor, stood strong against the desert sky. No longer abandoned. No longer hiding secrets. It was alive. And so was she. She thought the motel was all he left behind, but what he really left was proof that love doesn't end when someone dies, it just finds new ways to protect us. Sometimes the greatest act of love is the secret we keep until someone's strong enough to carry it.